Hello, everybody. Welcome to Gaia Education's webinar series. My name's Jane Rasbash, and I'm very excited this World Environmental Day to have this webinar on ecosystems restoration. And we're going to have Ashleigh Brown, who I'll introduce in a moment, from Eco Restoration Camps to have a chat with. The webinars will be streamed live on Facebook and YouTube, and will be recorded and made available on the Gaia Education social media channels. And you're very welcome to post questions in the chat box, which we'll try and respond to as we go along. So I would love to introduce Ashleigh Brown, co-founder and camp coordinator of Eco Restoration Camps. And Eco Restoration Camps partner with Gaia Education on our Eco Restoration Design course. And Ashleigh has extensive experience around the world with projects restoring degraded land and also teaching people how to do it. Hi there, Ashleigh. And she sees restoring landscapes as a restorative act for humanity. And this was really intriguing to me. So Ashleigh, welcome. I'd love to ask you, how is restoring landscapes a restorative act for humanity, in your opinion?
Thanks, Jane, and hi, everyone. So over the last 5 years, I have seen my own mental health massively improve since being a part of this ecosystem restoration movement. So I can speak from personal experience first, and then maybe go on to describe the changes that I've seen in people that have interacted with our camps, and then also look at a broader picture of how this work is the great work of our time and how it can really transform humanity in our role on Earth. So I started this work after discovering John Liu's documentary Green Gold on YouTube. And at that time, this was in 2016, at that time I was feeling really depressed, really angry, really negative about humanity and about our impacts, which is understandable. But having been involved in more traditional, conventional, like protesting, shouting sort of activism, I was left feeling really drained and really down. And then I discovered ecosystem restoration as a solution to so many of the issues that we're facing, both social and ecological. And having the chance to have a real impact and to transform humanity's relationship with the earth from something that's destructive to something that's regenerative has completely changed my outlook, my mood, my relationships, everything for the better. So what the camps are places that offer other people the opportunity to undergo that sort of transformation and have a positive impact that really means something. So that's one way that I see ecosystem restoration as a restorative act for humanity. And then on the broader, macro level, John Liu, our founder, always talks about how ecosystem restoration is the great work of our time. And so many people right now are really feeling the grief of the death of so much of our web of life. And they don't know how they can do anything about it. They feel really overwhelmed. They feel really helpless. And they feel really small in terms of the positive effect that they can have. And the act of physically fixing a degraded place and bringing it back to life gives people the opportunity to do something that makes a positive difference and to therefore no longer feel helpless, no longer feel depressed. And it also reminds us of our place in the world and in the web of life that is one that is very much a part of and not separate from nature, and realizing that brings a whole world of positive feelings and emotions of belonging, and yeah, I think separation is a really big cause of depression and anxiety and you know, fear of death and all of this stuff. And I could go on about this.
That's great. Thanks, Ashleigh, and thanks for linking it in with what we call in Gaia Education the worldview and the social, you know, because it is about the 4 dimensions of sustainability and eco-restoration in these courses that we work with. Could you tell us a bit more about what happens in an ecosystem restoration camp? Who would it be for? What would people do? Could you just give us a snapshot of that?
Mm-hmm. So the camps movement was created because John Liu, the founder, could see that there was a disconnect between hundreds and even thousands of people that want to take part in restoring land and landowners who want to farm or manage their land more regeneratively, but either don't know how to do it or don't have the money and the manpower to make it happen. So the camps were created as places to connect these two groups. And they are very different in a lot of ways. I mean, the ecosystem restoration camp model has been purposefully created to be really flexible so that lots of different types of people, lots of different types of contexts can use this model. But at a basic level, a camp is a place where people can go and take part in restoring land and learn how to do it together. And that can look like slum dwellers in Mombasa, Kenya, that are restoring their local mangrove forest. That can look like corporates going to camps in Brazil and taking part in the restoration of the Atlantic rainforest. That can look like school children in the south of Spain going and taking part in restoring the very desertified land just outside their school. Camps have been designed for everyone, and because there's so many of them, there's 41 of them now, there's something for everyone in each camp. Yeah. So
with the camps, you'd have different groups of people come into these specific camps, and then or do you go to the places that the people are at? They come to the camps, is that right? Sorry.
I'm not sure I understand your question.
Okay, so you said you've got 40 something camps. So that's where all your eco-restoration work takes place, in those camps, and you invite different groups to those to work on them. Is that what I've got?
Yeah, all of the camps have been locally initiated by a local community. So there's normally always a local community that is doing work there anyway.
Oh,
and then
okay.
People coming in from outside is just like an extra added bonus.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. My dog's just rushed in. Sorry about that. Yeah, and what advice could you give communities that are interested in eco-restoration, maybe not becoming ecosystem restoration, maybe not becoming a host, but possibly of your courses, but just generally, what kind of advice would you give to people who are interested but not sure where to start?
I would say that collaborating as much as possible is really valuable, especially if your restoration project is still in the ideas phase and you don't really know what you're doing. I would say don't try to do everything yourself. Try to create as many partnerships as possible with other people so that you can share the load of the work. Because often at the beginning of a project, you're doing it voluntarily and you're doing 10 people's jobs at once, and it can very easily become too overwhelming. So creating like a consortium of different partners who can play different roles. Don't try to do everything yourself. If there's a partner organization that can do something that's already been doing something for a long time, don't try to reinvent the wheel,
Yeah.
That would be one really big piece of advice. Also, start small and create a demonstration site that's really small and manageable that you can invite people to, and then show people what you've done, and then you'll build momentum in terms of support, both financial and manual support for expanding what you've done. Ask companies for sponsorship and donations in terms of tools and materials. But this is all kind of falling outside of the camps model. The camps model the camps movement has been created to support everyday people who want to restore
Yes.
degraded land. We have this online course that we're talking about today, which takes you through 16 different ecosystem restoration projects around the world, and you learn from practitioners as to how they got involved in the project, how they funded it, what the restoration techniques were that they used, what the challenges were that they faced, and how they resolved them. You learn how to make a business plan for a business idea to fund your restoration work, and you learn how to make a restoration design as a team and a plan for how to implement it. So the idea is you pass through this course, it takes 9 months, and then by the end, you know what you're doing and you feel comfortable and confident.
So it's kind of like an online, as much as it could be an online version of what you do in the camps. You know, how is it different to your camp programs? I mean, obviously it's online. How does that transfer?
The camp programs tend to be either you go along for a longer length of time, say 3 months. You could either go as an intern where you have like a set job that you're doing. You could go as a long-term camper where you're just helping out with whatever needs doing at the time, or you go for a specific shorter course or a workshop. But basically interacting with the camp in that way means that you're only focusing on certain topics and segments, whereas the 9-month course takes you through a whole like planned out chronological learning journey from beginning to end. And obviously it's accessible to anyone anywhere in the world as well.
So it's great that this has happened, and partnering with Gaia Education, because it's kind of taking the, you know, you're talking about partnership, and this is taking a partnership between an organization that looks at 4 dimensions of sustainability and one that's working really on kind of like the same thing with eco restoration as the focus. But you know, and going back to what you said at the start, how it can become a part of one's healing journey, or you know, to come out of denial of what's happening in the world, and that it can be a healing journey as well, it's really inspiring. Thank you so much for sharing that. And just, you know, as a final question, Ashleigh, is there a favorite, not a favorite, because I'm sure all your projects are amazing, but can you just talk us 1 or 2 projects where what the issue was and how it responded and what happened, just to paint a picture of a couple of these projects that have come from your work?
I can start by explaining the first camp, because I was part of its development, and so I know it really intimately, because I lived there for a year, and it's the first one ever, so it's kind of our flagship. So the south of Spain, the southeast of Spain, is very desertified due to climate change and irresponsible agriculture, I suppose. So a lot of taking from the land without giving back to it, which has caused desiccation, which means the land is just drying out, and therefore the biodiversity and what can live there is decreasing. And it is a place where a lot of Europe's fruit and veg is currently grown. So strategically, as an area in Europe, it is very important, and food growing is becoming more and more challenging due to erratic weather events, and the land just getting more and more degraded. It's not unable to support as much life. So there is a young farmer called Alfonso, who's very progressive in his mindset, who's been farming his family's land, has been in his family for generations. He's around 30 years old, so he He's just had a baby. He's bringing up his daughter on the farm, and he can see that the way that they've been farming in the past is just not going to continue into the future. It's, you know, the epitome of unsustainable. And he is also the chairman of, or the CEO, whatever you want to call it, of Al Valal. Al Valal is a cooperative of local landowners in Murcia and Granada, which are 2 regions in the south of Spain. And they are all working together to restore their landscapes. So he's already very plugged into this world of regeneration. John Liu went to visit his farm. He has a 1,300 hectare farm that he's regenerating, but obviously with that much land, he can only do it piece by piece. He can't completely transform the whole area to something that's super abundant straight away. But he has a piece of land that he wanted to give to the movement as the first camp. And we started work on restoring it in a way that would, because the land is not being farmed and therefore we aren't tied to producing a certain amount of crop or following more conventional ways of managing the land in order to produce and sell a certain amount of food. We have a lot more freedom to experiment with different forms of ecosystem restoration that other landowners can't afford to experiment with, just in case it goes wrong. So it's become like an experimentation and demonstration site that is, we built some ponds to catch rainwater, because the rain there is very erratic, and when it rains, it really rains really heavily because the land is really dry and degraded and compacted, or it was. The rain wouldn't seep into the ground, it would just run off and cause massive erosion. So we decompacted the soil, we built ponds, we built water retention earthworks on the land so that when it does rain, the rain is captured and sinks into the ground. We sowed a cover crop of lots of different species of plants that attracted loads of pollinators. We then holistically grazed sheep through the land so that the cover crop was eaten and defecated back out to build soil. We made and sowed loads of compost tea and compost, and we've been monitoring the increase in fertility over time. The organic matter level has increased by 30% in 2 years.
Wow.
And then we started an agroforest. We planted an agroforest that resembles or uses the same crops as other farmland does in the area, but we did it in a much more holistic polyculture manner, with almond as the main tree, because it's the largest area for rain-fed almonds in the country. In the world. So we grew an almond forest and then interspersed it with lots of different types of trees and aromatic plants that are also grown in the region, to kind of show this is an example of how regenerative these systems can be. And the camp welcomes campers from all over Europe and the world to take part in this work, and they're also supporting other landowners in the area now to implement these practices. So that's the first camp and how that works.
That sounds amazing. The aromatic herbs and the almond forest, and yeah, there's a project we were at Gaia Education working on in Sicily with aromatic herbs, a kind of restoration project. But really hearing about that size of farm and your camps come in and able to do experimental activities and support, the whole process, I think that's really, really inspiring. Is there anything else you'd like to share, Ashleigh? I think we've got a few minutes left.
Maybe I can talk a bit more about the course.
Yes, please talk. Maybe just share about the course. Yes. Oh, someone's asking, are you guys vegan as well? Maybe you can respond to that.
I feel like that is a whole massive topic that's actually quite unrelated.
Yeah, maybe we leave that question right now. That's a pause, but thank you. But going on to the course, please, can you just give us some background on that?
Yeah, so the course was created for people who want to learn how to restore degraded land and don't know how to do it, and they have a piece of land in mind. So, for example, I always walk out of my back garden down into the woods, and there's a stream there that is polluted. So I created the course with the idea that someone could bring that as a project and say, okay, I want to restore my local stream. I don't know how to do it. And then by the end of the course, they'll feel empowered with a restoration plan and a business plan for how to restore it.
Yeah.
But before you get to that point, you travel all around the world and learn from 4 practitioners per module. So there's 5 modules. The first module is about natural restoration. So you look at how to restore temperate forests, tropical forests, coral reefs, and deserts. And you learn from someone who has done a restoration project in that biome, and they explain how they have done that work. There are videos that you interact with that you can watch at any time. Every 25 students has a facilitator, so you always have someone that's looking after you, as it were, throughout the course that you can ask questions to. And then there's an hour-long call once a week where you get to ask your questions directly to the teacher who's been teaching during that lesson. The second module is about productive restoration, so agricultural land, and you look at different agricultural techniques that are restorative, such as permaculture, seaweed farming, holistic grazing. And then the third module is about urban restoration in cities. So you look at 4 different types of urban ecosystem restoration. And then in the 4th module, you learn about different business models that have been set up to restore land and how to create a business model canvas, which is basically like a one sheet that's got different sections that you fill in to put your business plan all on one page. And then the 5th module is you create your restoration plan with a team. And we've had about 80 restoration projects created as a result of.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Did you see Monica's question that came up, Ashleigh? She was asking about, are you aligned, or how are you aligned, or how do you work with the local wisdom cultures in the regeneration of the land, if you're working, I guess, in Indigenous areas in particular, or in how do you sort of align with the traditions, the local traditions?
Whenever we work in places where the local culture or the local Indigenous culture is present or accessible, we certainly take that into account. For instance, I mean, the whole idea of edible forests is an Indigenous creation. Yeah. We don't ever pretend that that's something that we've invented. So with every piece of land that we're restoring, there are some elements of a really ancient way of growing food that we are employing. And there are some camps that are working directly with Indigenous people if they are in places where Indigenous people live. So, for example, in Colombia, in the Sierra Nevada mountain range, we are working with the Indigenous people that live there and their communities, and they are the ones that are filling in the rainforest patches that have been destroyed by coca plantations, and they're very much leading on that, and we're just supporting them with whatever we can support them with. Basically, it's all, led by people who created the camps in the first place, and they're always either paying homage to a more Indigenous way of being if there aren't Indigenous people that live there, or they're working with them.
That's great. Thanks. And I think, yeah, Monica had a comment on that. There was one other question that came from someone about, do you fund projects? I can't see where that question is now, but yes, Abduli is asking, or how do you get, so say you go through your whole process and at the end you come up with a project. Does it cover how you would raise funds for it, or is there any funds from, I guess, what do you advise people on that?
So we often want to work with projects that show initiative to raise their own funds, because the whole point of the movement is that it's very decentralized, meaning that the team that I work for, that's part of what's called the foundation, we want to keep ourselves small so that as much as possible the camps are initiating themselves or they're showing their own initiative, and we're purely just a platform basically where we offer lots of different resources and people come and engage with the resources themselves.
Yeah.
So if a project comes to us and says, we can't do anything without you, we need all of this funding, otherwise nothing's going to happen, we'll often say, well, that's not really going to work. You have to show that you are capable and confident to raise some of your own funding, and then we'll be able to look for sources of funding to support you.
Yeah. So there's some sort of, you're not, I mean, neither Gaia Education or Eco Restoration Camps have funds for projects, are funding projects, but you can maybe signpost and give some support in the course.
We have a funding
and you also encourage people to really have their own startup funds to implement these projects that they design in the course.
Yeah, we just want to see that people are really trying their best to make their project happen. And once we see that there's a real fire and energy behind people and they really, they really want to do it, then we will help them. But
good. Yeah.
We have a fundraising team, and the fundraising team is working around the clock to write funding proposals for camps.
Oh, right. Okay.
Signpost them to different opportunities, and then there are certain elements that will help you fund. For instance, we'll help you with funds for trees if we have tree partners that are interested in helping out. Collection materials, stuff like that. And our plan in the future is to have a camp development fund, so we can give grants out to camps, but seeing as we're still a startup ourselves, we haven't quite got to that level of income yet, but that is a plan for the future.
It's in the plan. Yeah. Well, thank you, Ashleigh. I think we're coming to the end now, so I just really want to thank you for everything you've shared. It's been really inspiring for me to hear about all the work you're doing and with the camps around the world. And if anyone's interested in the course that Ashleigh's been talking about, which is in partnership with Gaia Education, please just go to the websites. I think the addresses are in the chat. And so thanks again.
That email address is incorrect, by the way. It's info@ecosystemrestorationcamps.org. You've written info at. Just to flag that. That's not the right address.
Can you sort that out?
Yeah.
Saskia? Yeah, so we've got someone backstage that's sorting those things out. Oh, yeah. That's it correct on there now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions about anything, please, go ahead and send an email or look at both the websites, the two websites, and hopefully we'll see some of you on the course. And we're going to finish with, there's going to be a little film of a testimonial from someone who joined one of our courses. So that will be coming. I think his name's Peter. That will come to close us. So I'd just like to thank everybody for this opportunity, on World Earth Day, to really think about restoration and what it means and how we can kind of get inspired for our communities to make a difference in the world. And thanks again, Ashleigh. I hope I meet you again soon and learn more about your amazing work. Thanks.
Thanks, Jane. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.
The reason that I decided to take the ecosystem restoration design course was because the world desperately needs people to restore it to the way it was intended, with all the natural balances and cycles in place. The biggest insight I've had so far from this course is that over a very large range of topics, I found out that all the knowledge basically is there, all the techniques are there, basically nature does all the work. We just need to solve the human factor. How do we align everyone to apply the knowledge that we have and that basically is deep inside us since a long time. I am going to try to apply this knowledge by making a tiny forest in my hometown of Amsterdam, and in a bit of concrete jungle of 1,000 square meters, together with other students and local stakeholders. I hope to make a beautiful forest where animals and birds and plants can feel at home again in the city, and remind us that the world is not ours, but we are part of the world.